Hi guys, hope you're well. As you can see, I'm back in the small loft this week. In fact, I've been back a few days from France, but unfortunately, I don't know whether you can tell, I'm really full of cold, so I've not actually really felt like doing anything the last few days. In this video, I thought I would discuss the difference between working with a table saw and working with a track saw in a really small workshop. So I've been working up here for about 4 or 5 years, and originally when I came up here, the only thing I had was actually a jigsaw, and then I bought a handheld circular saw, and for that I made a little track so I could use it almost like a track saw. And then I bought my DeWalt table saw. I've used that for about 2 years before splurging on my track saw. Now, I'm not going to talk about which track saw, which table saw to buy, because obviously there's a lot of price points. I decided to buy a more expensive track saw, but I also have the £100 Triton track saw that Screwfix made, and I got on with that absolutely fine. That's at Workshop 2 at the moment. In terms of table saw and track saws, I just thought it was interesting to discuss the difference in working in the confines of a really small workshop. Usually when I'm talking of table saws here, I'm not talking about a big cabinet saw with a cast iron top. First of all, I personally wouldn't get it in this space anyway, but I think most small workshops would struggle with the sheer size of a unit like that. I suppose the first consideration for either saw is what kind of work you think you're going to do. If you're going to rip down 1 or 2 inch timber, then both machines will cope with that fine. If you want to start cutting down a 3-inch plank, or if you want to cut down say half a log, then it's a little bit more difficult with a track saw. It's not impossible, but if you're using sheet materials, MDF, chipboard, plywood, OSB, then the track saw is perfect for that. Important factor whether to use a table saw or to use a track saw is the actual size of your workshop. In a really small workshop, it's probably easier to bring the saw to the workpiece than the workpiece to the saw. So this workshop is 14 foot long, so I can't cut on my table saw anything longer than 7 foot because I have to pass the timber through the saw, whereas the track saw is pretty much ready to go either here or in this little cradle I've made here so I can pull it out straight across my bench. I have to keep my saw pushed in the corner over there, and if I want it I bring it out. Usually when I want it I've stacked something up on the table, I've got to move that. If I'm trying to cross cut anything on the saw, then actually I can't cut anything wider than about 4 feet. I just can't get that material through the saw. Now I don't have that confined with the track saw because I can just put it on the bench here, pull my rail out and just make the cuts in either direction. So in theory, if I had long enough rail, and I've probably got about 12 feet of rail, I can actually get a piece of 14 foot timber in here and cut the entire thing. I actually prefer when I'm buying timber to pick up pieces either 6 foot long, and if it's sheet material 6 foot long, 2 foot wide. That's the kind of parameters I usually work to. Certainly putting a piece of say 18mm MDF that's 6 foot long, 2 foot wide through my table saw up here is very, very tricky. But that leads on to my next point, which is portability. If you have a small workshop and you can't take your saw outside, or don't want to take your worksite outside for whatever reason, then a table saw is really cumbersome to get in and out of the workshop. Where this thing, I can put it in a box or just carry it by hand and just walk outside with it, make my cut and bring it back in again. And I've got the option with this with dust extraction, or with a little dust bag that fits on. My next point, dust extraction. This has a single point dust extraction. The blade is almost totally surrounded, so that means that the dust extraction is quite good. So therefore I don't make too much of a mess with this, compared to the table saw, which is really spitting sawdust out in 2 directions, from under the table and from above the table. Now if you've got the crown guard on, you can capture most of that. If you don't, and I know a lot of people don't, and really we should, but we don't, then the saw makes more mess. My next point is safety. Because the blade is pretty much in the shroud here, it's very hard to actually get your fingers in it. Now there is the opportunity when you're running across a board and the blade is popping out of the bottom, so no woodworking machine with a spinning blade is absolutely 100% safe. Usually with this you've actually got your hands on the saw anyway, so you've not really got any contact with your hands to the blade. There may be actually contact with other parts of your body if you're not working correctly. The only thing that you could encounter is some kickback where the saw sort of jams and kicks back at you. Again, if you've got both hands on, probably a lot safer. With the table saw, you've got a spinning blade and you're pushing things across the blade. So if you're not fully concentrated, that's probably where most accidents happen, or indeed where people actually have gone through the cut and then kind of just catch the blade on the backside. Much more dangerous opportunity using table saws, which is why we should use that crown guard. And then there's also kickback to consider. Every now and again, I had one in when I was making the garage doors the other week where the timber just wants to close up on the blade, and you can get over that with putting a little wedge in the end, but if you're not careful, that timber can just come back at you at quite a speed. In fact, I've seen a video on Instagram this morning, it coming back at someone working outside and going straight through kind of the garage doors. So from a safety point of view, I'm absolutely certain that the track saw is safer than a table saw. And if you consider the dust extraction into that health and safety route as well, then it probably even more so. My next point is actually making cuts that are either beveled or diagonal cuts. It's really easy to do that on the track saw. You just make your marks where you want to cut from A to B, put your track down and then just cut away. Quite easy. And of course, if you want to make a 45 degrees or another bevel cut, that's easy. Just crank it over and just do the same. If you want to do that on the table saw, by all means it's possible. You've got to make yourself some jigs to do that. I have a tapering jig which goes on the saw and I can cut tapers on that. That's the same, but you've got to make that jig to do that. My jig can taper something 1300 long, which means I need 2.6 meters to get it through the saw, whereas on this I can do it in that 1.3 meter length. I've cut things like tenons on both saws. I've tenons on there and I've cut tenons on here. Saw sleds for small repeatable cuts. I can also do that on here with this bench dog system. Bench dog system's really made a massive difference to the quality of work I can make the confines of this workshop. But you can do that on the saw. You can make jigs for that. I have a little jig here for cutting vertical tenons, which would be a little bit more difficult on there, but it's not impossible because you could cut it the other way. You could cut across the cheeks and then just chisel and plane the whole thing out. So it's absolutely possible to do that. Just thought I'd make a quick video about the difference between the two saws and how I see it for working in a small workshop. But these are my thoughts. Please let me know your thoughts. And until next week, when hopefully I'm a little bit less sniffly, I'll see you soon.